As we all know, the pandemic prompted an explosion of digital exhibitions, but it also seems like there's a major shift back to in-person once those restrictions have been lifted, in large part because of the ongoing perception that online exhibitions are not as good as in-person. The common refrain of presence is often leveraged when talking about the gallery experience, referring both to the presence of other viewers and to that magical aura that comes from sharing a space with objects. This term aura comes from Walter Benjamin, who defines it as a conceptual distance between the viewer and the thing, where each maintains their unique trace of history, leading to the sensation of shared time and space. These physical traces of the object's age and changes in their ownership are embodied by the thing, creating a reference not only to its original objectness, but also a unique subjectivity as something that's had its own experience of the world. Perhaps what viewers miss is this aura or co-presence of seeing and being seen. It may be productive to reconsider this idea of aura as performative, where traces on the object act not just as a physical material, but also indexical marks of time passing, which creates a relational dynamic between the viewer and the object. The traditions of cinema and video games may offer additional insight here, since they're mediums that are designed for this kind of exchange between the physical beholder and a virtual object. For example, the online battle royale game Fortnite, famous for its 100-player shootouts in goofy branded avatars and environments, has been at the forefront of monetizing digital object collectibles through microtransactions. And it's also been hosting live events even before the pandemic, including major concerts by DJ Marshmello in February 2019 and Travis Scott in April 2020, just at the start of the pandemic, as well as art exhibitions by The Factory in Manchester in July 2020, and more recently, London's Serpentine Gallery in January 2022, for those looking for slightly more recent examples. While these events were largely separate from the actual gameplay of Fortnite, and they weren't truly interactive, it does mark a shift towards the mainstreamization of these online games as artistic presentation platforms. Yet, there's also creative potential in these environments that goes just beyond that simple reproduction of space. The particularity of video games became an integral part of the creative process for Ender Gallery, a year-long Minecraft residency and exhibition hosted by the Mackenzie Art Gallery in Regina, Canada. Throughout 2021, the online space hosted 4 artists in residence, each spending 4 months working and exhibiting in Minecraft. The game enables players to build whatever they like from scratch, harvesting resources to generate structures, landscapes, and other objects, playing the game either by following quests and stories, or just by expressing themselves by building. And in Gender Gallery, artist Kat Haynes constructed a monumental environment dedicated to her gender transition. In this pixel world of Minecraft, she constructed a home-based studio, several outdoor meeting plazas, one of which you can see here on the screen, and a large blue phallus built into the side of a mountain with a vagina-shaped cavern behind it that can contain poetry and photography. During the exhibition opening that you see here, Haynes led visitors around the space, both in Minecraft and then also on YouTube and Twitch live streams for those who couldn't access the game. In the process, she set fire to the giant phallus, destroying it to enable access to the vaginal gallery space. With this gesture, Haynes demonstrated that the entire environment could function as an artwork, and potentially even as a performance, since it was possible to build and deconstruct elements in real time. While the protective visitor setting prevented audiences from altering the environment during the tour, they were allowed to eat and drink during the final reception portion, which indicates that it would be conceivable for more interactivity if the artist chose to enable it. In adventure mode, guests can interact with characters and craft and destroy structures, but they can also take damage, so it contributes an exciting dynamic of risk to the viewing encounter. Implicating spectators requires an unfolding experience that's linked to their real life. This doesn't necessarily require an accurate illusion, but rather a sensation of that the viewer's actions matter and they contribute to the situation. Discussing the ontology of virtual reality, artist Malcolm Legris points out 3 key stages in the creation of a complete immersion. Number 1 is the narrative flow that encourages the spectator to collude in the illusion. Number 2 is a sense of real time or continuous uncertainty, that the next moment is unscripted. And number 3 is interactivity that provides the spectator with a sense that their actions matter to the sequence of events. In other words, a successful virtual reality requires not just photographic realism, and you'll note that maybe photographic realism isn't even necessary since we're playing in Minecraft and Animal Crossings and occupy white walls in spaces that don't look real. But rather it requires temporal flow and meaningful agency. So while Haynes's gender gallery didn't literally enable visitor interactivity, the artist did have that functionality herself during the development of the environment. And the live tour created a performative event where the viewers engaged in direct conversation with the artists and curators. Minecraft, and also the YouTube and Twitch live streams, chat functions allowed viewers to converse, underscoring the normal social functions of gallery openings that are often lost in the lonely, infinite space and time of the virtual. This engagement is inherent in the multiplayer online environment, where gamers are often expected to talk and interact with strangers in order to complete in-game tasks. It's this social interactivity that often contributes to the sensation of shared space and time in multiplayer video games. So while this idea of seeing is usually associated with a living being, Benjamin's notion of aura also connotes a sense of agency for the objects themselves. In digital images, the subjective position is less obvious because they don't retain this physical trace of time and space. Film theorist Laura Marx expands on Vivian Sobchak's notion of cinema as an intersubjective exchange between 2 entities, a human observer and an expressive object, that both retain their subjective positions. Laura Marx articulates a theory of haptic visuality, whereby cinematic images can generate a feeling of co-presence by disrupting the viewer's process of recognition. She uses the example of experimental films, where archival documentary footage is degraded to the point of unrecognizability, using scratches and glitches and even just blank voids in the leader, forcing the viewer to fill in the missing information with their own assumptions. What she calls the optical image generates a sensation of co-presence because the cinematic image resists full understanding, thereby retaining its own subjective stance. Additionally, in this process, the viewer is also required to rely on their own personal memories, linking the meaning to their bodies and experience through the process of dialogue with the image object. Meaning, then, is co-produced and shared through that mutual encounter. Within Gender Gallery, visitors experienced photographs and poetry hosted in the cavernous gallery by navigating close and clicking on the object to interact. Photographs were viewed from a distance in small painting frames, but books of poetry could be clicked on, opened, and read page by page like a normal book, although the text was shaped by the materiality of the Minecraft book asset, which limited line lengths, fonts, and also required the viewer to manually rewind the book when they were done for the next reader to start at the beginning. The strange formatting of the book enacts Marx's haptic visuality, requiring the viewer to literally interact to turn the pages, but doing so in a strange, childlike format, with only a few lines of blocky text on each page. The page resembles a book, but also early pixel-based video games, creating a doubled experiential reference. And for those of us old enough to remember, maybe even the experiential reference of having to rewind a VHS tape before you return it to the movie store. Haynes also constructed the gallery with modified versions of a common Minecraft resource, wrapping photographs of her own genitals around the standard concrete block asset, literalizing the relational dynamic between herself and the virtual objects of Minecraft. The viewers then also had to recalibrate their understanding of the space, particularly if they were regular Minecraft players who would recognize the unfamiliarity of the texture. Finally, Haynes and Ender Gallery and the Mackenzie Art Gallery packaged these altered assets as a resource pack, which is available to any Minecraft player to use as a resource for their own builds from now on. In this way, visitors can then take up the objects from Haynes's space and develop their own personal relationships with them. Highlighting a more complex application of gaming interactivity towards art experience, Occupy White Walls was open to early access gamers in March 2020, when the launch of their Kickstarter coincided with the start of the pandemic. As a sandbox, massive multiplayer online social game, it has a similar building function as Minecraft, but is also driven by the social dynamic of having other real online players visit your gallery and engage with your space through exploration, chatting, and messaging, and then using your space as inspiration to develop their own galleries. Rather than harvesting resources to build objects, Occupy White Walls provides the user with slick-looking pre-designed elements that can be arranged in a variety of ways. And then the player can then focus on populating their architectures with artworks, choosing by browsing through the database that was mentioned earlier, embedded with an AI algorithm, and they call the database DAISY. It's an acronym for something that helps to tailor the searches to the user's interests. More traditional curation is also possible by finding artworks by the same artist or by visiting other user galleries to see what they've collected. In the personal galleries, players build one-on-one relationships with the images, where the artworks are no longer just autonomous objects, but now they become part of the user's reflective process and their expression of critical and creative ideas. The randomization or artificially intelligent curation of DAISY also calls to mind the surrealist games of chance. And users have leveraged this dynamic in both their own designs, creating surreal-looking spaces, but also to issue design challenges where other players can participate in a private game. In the Common Plaza area, there's a Rolla gallery space that generates design prompts based on dice rolls. And you can see in the lower image here, there's a large looking dice in the bottom. You click an interact dynamic and it spins. Creativity here is stimulated by the prompt boundaries, and the results are displayed in a large compilation gallery. Other users have created puzzle environments where the artwork and the architecture function as a maze, a joke, or a critical statement. The Hotel Mendeleev is an example where the player has created a large exhibition themed around the periodic table of elements, with each element represented by one or more artworks. Curatorial choices have been made based on wordplay, obtuse historical facts, or other personal connections by the curator. And the users also turn the architecture into a puzzle of sorts, with secret doors and passageways that reveal surprise elements or Easter eggs. When I first viewed this space in summer 2021, the user V111 was logged in and eager to chat with me. And they offered a tour of the space and explained some of their choices and the secrets of the space. It's this ability to socialize where the game truly begins to generate a sense of presence that distinguishes it from some of the prior examples. As with the gender gallery opening, Occupy White Walls allows concurrent users to have real-time conversations with one another through a text chat function. While this creates a sense of immediate presence, the sociality of Occupy White Walls is also asynchronous, allowing users to leave messages on other people's gallery walls, comment on artworks, which also contributes to the layers of personal meaning that can be shared about the artwork. And then the game also has two out-of-game social platforms on Cultura, which allows the users to create their own blogs and critical writing about their gameplay, as well as a Discord server. And the Discord server is quite active and has posts almost every day, even multiple years after the launch of the game. The game also supports a kind of artificial sociality in the game, where a feeling of co-presence is used to make gallery viewing feel more like the in real life or IRL gallery experience. To prevent the emptiness that often accompanies online galleries, Visiting users are encouraged to use an open gallery function, which starts a timer announcing the gallery in the global chat, prompting other users to visit, and then flooding the gallery with non-playable characters or NPCs. These visitors create a feeling of shared viewing, where it's difficult to distinguish between real and non-real art avatars, many of whom have names floating above their heads as if they were real, and who add quiet footsteps to the musical ambiance of the gallery. By hearing and seeing other bodies populate the space, it makes the virtual gallery feel less lonely. Players have to navigate around other bodies to view the artwork, just as they might in an IRL gallery space, and players can follow the NPCs around to see where those algorithmic interests might lead them. This open gallery function also generates in-game money for the gallery owner, which they can then spend to purchase more artworks for the space. As a visitor, opening the gallery feels like a form of polite tipping, where you can reward someone for the quality of their space and recognize the labor that's gone into the design. Viewed outside of that social function, the open gallery is primarily a means for the user to generate that currency that can then be used to purchase artworks, which becomes more useful as you level up based on your activity and the artworks slowly become more expensive. This dynamic is disconnected from real-world economics because there's no way to buy in-game currency in the way that Fortnite does. So instead, it serves to just increase the challenge level of the game and encourages users to be selective in their collecting and their building. With limited funds, one has to slowly build up inventory and make design choices and force more critical reflection, or make design choices rather than just slapping everything down at once. It slows the pace of the game and forces more critical reflection on the artworks and environments. However, the process of clicking the open gallery can also be seen as a form of grinding for points or coins, a sometimes dull aspect of video gaming, but one that seemed to reward the player by leveling up or allowing them to receive better in-game items. Here, grinding might also be seen as a way to link the reward of collecting to its labor, mimicking the real-world art economy. One of the drawbacks to Occupy White Walls versus something like Minecraft is that the complexity of the interface and self-contained software could present a challenge to new players. It requires time and effort to navigate an unfamiliar interface. And because of the seemingly infinite bounds of virtual space, there's no way of knowing when the experience will end. Psychologist Stephen Bitgood outlines a model of museum attention based on the visitor's cost-benefit analysis, influenced by the visitor's physical and mental energy when they start the viewing experience, as well as their perception of utility or interest in the exhibition, as well as museum design decisions, including layout, the number and variety of objects that are available, the amount of text and reading required, and restful spaces like benches and cafes. The practical implications of attention and value in the digital world mean that a number of factors could disrupt attention, and therefore that sensation of presence, including the player's skill, non-normative accessibility needs, interface design, the quality of the hardware and software, internet connection, etc. Additionally, the walled garden nature of video games requiring login accounts, specifically downloaded software, access to backend user data, upfront costs and microtransactions, etc., also create hurdles to participation. That said, there's potential in the ways that these video game platforms have been leveraged towards art experiences, although they still do not quite capture that same feeling of presence as IRL exhibitions. In many of these environments, I find myself lost in time and the experience. I'll look up 2 hours later, bleary-eyed, and realize how long I've been playing. By generating a sense of interactive agency, directing attention through narratives and in-game tasks, and creating haptic encounters with virtual objects, video game environments may be able to create their own sense of presence that's dependent not just on physical proximity, but also all of the other rich social and temporal elements that make up human experience. Thank you very much.